So this is the video about DeWitt Perry, and I'll have to draw some pictures of this. Big John Basili, who was at the hospital with me, and Richard Murphy, Nick Carrera also, I think he was there, maybe Cisco as well. We occasionally all worked out together after school, which is after 4 o'clock. But I think it's important for me to say this because there was two coaches that I made this video about. There was a guy by the name of Coach Burns, Michael Burns, and Coach Sullivan. And I remember walking by Coach Sullivan, and people always want to take on the character of Ken Cooper, and so that they remain in power. And I remember walking by Coach Sullivan. I never had any classes with him or was on his football team or anything. And I was in 7th grade at this time, and also in 8th grade. And I remember him trying to scare me. I remember him looking at me like, and both of these guys are gay. Now, they figured out by the time I was in 8th grade that Richard Murphy was gay. Richard Murphy also told me that John Basili was gay, Anthony was gay. And Nick Carrera told me the same thing. But I think it's important for me to say these things because, I did grow up. These were my best friends. But understanding how the adults target the children, the homosexuals, that then turn against the straight kid to make a benefit for the Cooper family and racism, white prejudice, because the dead little girl, and because guess who's in charge? So I was in 7th grade around the time that my sister died. I was somewhere around 7th grade to 8th grade when my sister died. I don't know, she didn't get a proper burial. I don't know what the circumstances were. She just got thrown in the trash can, basically, and the Cooper family and Sarah and all them dwindled them and targeting my mother, and it's too late. They're going to make whatever story they want and feel sorry for them because they're old now, and then can pass it down to their kids and then whitewash it. That's exactly what they're going to do. And they did. You'll remember me when I say this, whether I'm alive anymore or not, how powerful, scumming these people were, and the supremacists that were involved in this and targeting what they did to me. These people should have been the ones that should have been put down, not me. But I say this in the desperation of my mother. We're working out at a gym. When we're working out at a gym, 4 o'clock, I'm like in 7th or 8th grade, and I talked about this in one of my other videos where Michael Burns is working out there. He never works out with the kids. There was nothing but maybe 5 kids in the entire gym. It's probably the same size of this apartment, like 5 or 6 times. And we're working on the bench press, and he's lifting weights, and it's after school, and he began to asking me, how many brothers and sisters do you have? And he's like, he kind of looked and he's thinking to himself. Now you got to keep in mind, I don't know who this is. Just guy, Michael Burns. This is just guy that works. He's a history teacher that works at DeWitt Perry. He doesn't know anything about my life, but he seems to be a little bit more interested in me in the sense of like investigating me. Not like anything homosexual, nothing like that. He's pretty firm as a person, but I recall him asking me, and he says, and he goes, "You don't have any sisters?" And he goes, "You don't have any sisters?" I go, "No, not that I know of. I mean, I have a half sister, but that was my dad's first marriage." And Sullivan all of a sudden was like waiting by the door, and then he looks over at Michael Burns, Coach Burns, or Michael Burns, and then he looks at, and he says, and he looks over at Burns, and he says. And like he didn't say anything. He just looks and and he's like just points at me, and he's just like pausing, and you could tell they're having this secret conversation, like communication to one another. And then he gets off the bench press, and me and Richard are lifting weights, and this is like he just gets up, and he's not pissed or anything, and he walks and he does this. He walks and he does this, and he goes. And he does that. And I just think to myself, and he goes, and he walks off. Now, this is around the same time This is around the same time my sister dies, and Frankie is like on the verge of going to the military, in the Navy. And I'm 13 to 14 years old in 7th grade. And I think it's important. I think it's important for me to say this. I was about 13 or 14 years old in 7th grade. And I was 13 or 14 years old in 7th grade, because I was 12 years old in 6th grade. My dad committed suicide. Then I turned 13 in 6th grade, so I entered 7th grade at 13 years old. And then I turned 14 later that year in 7th grade. And I say this because one day I was in my history class. Now, he had a picture of his wife that looked like Sarah Cooper. I didn't know at this time, but I wasn't really looking to see if he was gay or not, but this guy was gay, 100%. And I recall that I was in history class, in the entire classroom, and I remember him kind of standing up, and the class was very easy, very, very simple and easy. And he occasionally told me, "Good job, Hector," and he would kind of, sort of do that, and it was because of the guy Miguel raped, because I knew all about the rape that had happened to Frankie. So it was kind of like telling me, like, good job for saying something about what had happened to Frankie, but he didn't want to tell me that. And then he sits down, quickly goes over to see me, goes, like he's blushing, like he's festing this emotion of, like, my gay members, one of my fellow gays, you know better than to do that, you need to boo-boo. And that's a lot of the behavior I've come across every homosexual about Miguel, every one of them, every single one of them. And about how we can feel sorry for that and not send him to prison, or how we just feel sorry for the boo-boo from Michael Jackson. And I remember in this class, he tells and he says, "My name is Michael," and he goes and does this, like he's standing up. And he kind of looks over and glances at me, and he goes, and then he toodles off to his desk. And so they're gauging me about Michael Jackson, not just the dead little girl, but now it's because of Michael Jackson. No, and now it's because of the rape. They're just taking whatever they want. Anything that they want, they steal and take. So I was in class, and I don't know who's involved financially, but this is around, I was 7th grade, around the time when my sister died, okay? And 7th to 8th grade. And I think the only reason I think I was in 7th grade when she died, because I was like 13, 14 years old. I say this, yeah, that is right. Because if I was in 7th grade, 13, Miranda or Marissa, she was 18 months older than me. If she was 18 months older than me, yeah, that would have put me at 7th grade, at just about 7th, yeah, in 7th grade. So I didn't even know. And they would have found out, wait a minute, you don't have a sister that died and she just died and buried? So, and this is in the gym, right? But I'm in the class, this is in the same time frame, within that 6-month time frame. And I'm in the class, and he goes, "Oh, don't worry, my wife will pay for it." And he just looks at me in the middle of class, and it was a kind of a ruckus class where a lot of kids are always like throwing paper airplanes and joking and talking a lot. It was kind of a joking class a little bit. And that's what the class was like. That's exactly what the class was like. And when we're in that class, he goes, "Oh, don't worry, my wife will pay for it." He goes, and he looks over at me, he goes, "Don't worry, my wife will pay for it." And he kind of blushes, and he walks over to the desk where he's at, and he has a picture of a lady who looks like Sarah Cooper. And he's at his desk, and I happen to take a paper over to him, like a homework or something, or some paper we had to do in class. And it's a very kind of a ruckus class. And he looks, and he's kind of talking to himself, like, "Yeah, my wife." And then later that semester, or a couple days later, within that week, he's in the class, and he makes conversation. He goes, yeah, my wife. And then he walks over to his desk. So I don't know if this symbolizes that Sarah Cooper could have paid for the funeral of my dead sister, or financially paid or did something. So I think it's very important because my dad and my mom's daughter and my dead sister, who's my only direct, same mother and same father, but Michaela, this is your sister who died. My father who raised me, Rain Palomo, and our sister, and my mother's daughter, they died, they overdosed and had a tragic event very close to one another. My father committed suicide in like October or August, September, or even November. I don't think it was Halloween yet. It was between June, July, August. It was between August and November. Somewhere between August and November was my dad committed suicide when I was 12 years old in the 6th grade. And we didn't celebrate Thanksgiving, and we didn't celebrate for sure Christmas. For sure we didn't celebrate Thanksgiving that year, and didn't celebrate Christmas. So I don't even think, it could have been maybe early November, but I want to say it was somewhere between August and October that he took all these pills. He didn't know where he was. They found him in a jail cell, and I talked about all the details, and he didn't know where he was, but he tried killing himself, basically ODing. And he did, but he didn't know who he was, but he didn't die. So that's what remained him in the nursing home for the rest of his life. So when he was in the nursing home, when that happened, my sister next door, this is around the same time, because Sarah Cooper is entirely nasty to my mother at the, persecuting, cutting my mother's throat open at the hospital, the nursing homes we're transferring my dad to, and she was with Ken Cooper threatening my mother as a law enforcer, and using Sarah as a threatening tool. And it was Ken Cooper the entire time that was doing the threats that you better let her do what she wants, otherwise I'm gonna come after you. And it was a threat, and I remember that very well. And I talked about that there was some black lady at the desk that she got up and left, and they had him on camera, where they came and charged at my mother, and they wouldn't get near my mother. Frankie will tell you this, if he's perfectly fine, they would not get near my mother. Like, they walked over, and my mother was giving them this crazy look, like, you better get away from my kids. Like, if there's anything in life you've ever seen a mother try to protect her baby cubs, and she's willing to die for it, that's exactly what my mother was behaving like. Because Sarah Cooper started trying to poison and talk to Frankie, and was like, oh, hey, Frankie, and she walks, oh, you're on this side. So it was monstrous, because Ken Cooper's the one that charged at my mother. And, he was trying to use his law enforcement badge for personal services against my mother to threat. So this is so long ago, many years ago, this is around the time that my mom's daughter's dying. And I don't know how she died exactly. There was a guy at one of the casinos at Golden Entertainment at the grocery store inside one of the casinos that was making fun of my dead sister, and he goes, yeah, I walked in and I found her dead, just laying on the floor, and she just wasn't alive, laying on the bed. And he just told me that to my face. That's how I know how she died. I assumed that that's probably already why, even when I knew that little girl died next door that way, because my sister had Down syndrome, and she was laying on the floor, she couldn't stand up, so she either died on the couch, the floor, or the bed. And but this guy at the casino who was representing Ken Cooper at the radio station, they try to get these characters to role play, and they were threatening me in the casino. They were trying to use a dead little girl to make me feel sorry for the lookalike of Kenneth Cooper at the radio station, DJ Keno. And the technicians would show up and then threaten me, intimidate me, so that I stay submissive for the dead body exchange credit, for emotion, to who gets the pat on the back and who gets scolded in a better life, who we're going to feel sorry for more now. And anyway, that's what he said. I was in Las Vegas, and that's the guy at the casino. He said that she was just dead on the couch, and he said it just like that, making fun of my sister. And he was behaving in a way like he was doing a shootout killing. Like I don't know if you ever seen those cowboy white boys. The behavior that they do when they refer to murdering someone is very cold. It's very very disgusting. It's white supremacist KKK. I'll hang your ass and your colored black ass on a fucking tree to show you some real white power kind of attitude and direction. And he begins doing this I sort of feel uncomfortable, but you don't understand how much I'm kissing ass all the time to this guy until anyone else is around. But I wanted to say this, that I think it's important, because I don't want to trail off to another conversation, but this is on the topic of my dead sister. The girl dies next door. I'm in 7th grade. And what happens with her? What happens well, my dad commits suicide. Within 8 months of that time frame of my dad committing suicide, within less than a year, my sister dies. There's no proper burial, there's no ceremony, there's nothing. There's not a tombstone, there's not a conversation. My mom just shows up on the front doorstep with deep sunken eyes. And she just kind of thinking to herself, not mad at me. And I go, Mom, what's wrong? And you know, and she sits on the couch and she's just like this, and I don't know what's going on. So I know that Lupe, I talked about this Lupe, which is the one that was friends with Patricia Gardina that infected me with the HIV virus and raped me, and the people that used her as a weapon against my mother and the dead little girl and me, and excuses from President Barack Obama and George Bush for the transgender blacks and the transgender emotion for him, is they ended up, Lupe went to like the hospital or something, and they wouldn't even tell me what they were going to hospital for, but they were behaving like somebody was going to die in real life. And Lupe went with my mom. So I don't know if she showed up to the hospital. I don't know what the situation was at all. I wasn't told nothing. But I just know that my mother, the way that she talked, and she was walking to the car, and she goes, I'll be back. I'm going to be gone for about 3 or 4 days. And it was just gloom. It was very gloomy, very, not just gloomy, what do you call, I guess gloomy is the best word. Like, it was just real gloomy. It wasn't getting cold. It was about this same temperature outside right now when it happened, but at night, or a little bit warmer. It was like 75 degrees at night, 70 degrees. It was about 70 to 75 degrees at night. And they were going somewhere, and then my mom was gone for a couple of days, and I don't know if she came home a day or two, and then they buried her. I'm not, because I wasn't told anything. There was no conversation. Ivan didn't tell me anything. Ivan had told Frankie that she had died, but I wasn't acknowledged that this was my sister, and I wasn't. And I remember Frankie talked about it very lightly, and he goes, Ivan's sister died, right? And I goes, what are you talking about, Ivan's sister? Yeah, she died. What? So I'm very disconnected, because at this point, I wasn't seeing this girl outside walking all the time very often before she died. She was in a wheelchair, in a severe handicapped wheelchair at the very end of her life. I'd say that the last 6 months of her life, maybe 3 months of her life, 4 or 5 months. I would say 3 to 5 months at most. Could have only been maybe 3 months, 2 months that she was in a wheelchair, and I saw her, and she was already in a bad situation. So I don't know if my mother was being warned that she was going to be dying soon. I immediately knew when I saw her that she didn't have too much time left, and it was bad. And I think Ivan was there. But I wanted to say that because there was no conversation with Ivan, with my mom, I ever saw. And Ivan's nothing but to blame for it. I know how his parents were very well. I knew his structural house. I knew when he went to work. I knew how he drove his bike. I was good friends with him riding bikes all the time. So he was around Julian, and so I thought it was important for me to say this because, there's not any communication between me and Ivan after the little girl at all. Like, there's no friends, there's not hatred, it's just you go about your life. And, I thought it was just because my mom and him kind of didn't get along all that great. Um, and I think it's important because, when I was in seventh grade and my dad commits suicide and she dies, and Sarah, the Cooper family's doing this, and then Kenneth gets a job at the radio station, all this publicity and all this other stuff, I don't even know that's going on. And I think it's important to say about this because if it's going to my middle school and I'm at DeWitt Perry about this dead little girl, why is it that this guy's referencing? So I'm saying this because my assumptions are now starting to think that I think Sarah Cooper's the one that paid financially, snuck in and paid financially who was going to bury the dead little girl and my father. Sarah and Ken had nothing to do with my mother. They didn't show up for Christmas card. There was nothing polite phone calls. I talked to them maybe once or twice, and they tried sort of manipulating me, like trying to be nice. But I knew that wasn't it because they treated my mom shit. My mom always had an instinct to protect us, and she said, "Don't worry about that. I don't give a damn." And my mother would get so emotionally enraged when she tried to talk to me and Frankie. She only called and spoke to us maybe 3 times in her entire life over the phone, and maybe once or twice with Frankie that I was around. But I think it's important for me to discuss this because the dead little girl has already moved on, passed on. This is 35 years ago. Not 35, I was 14, so this is 30 years ago. Not 30, it's about 25. 25, it's about 25 years ago. So, I'm 40 years old. No, it's 28. 28 years ago. I was 12 years old. My dad, it's 28 years ago. So I think it's important for me to say this because my mother, that's her daughter. We didn't have a picture in our house. And now my mother has dementia, and I don't think something bad happened to Frankie. Frankie was very protective. For Kenneth Cooper to ever showing up and did what he did is the ultimate, most disgrace, hateful, satanic shit that he could have ever done to that little girl and ever done to my mother because he knew and manipulated, and he then tried to take control over my father, claiming that was his grandpa and he was the one charging at me. I talked about this, that I tried getting a piece of cake, or not a piece of cake, at his apartment. And he goes, "Oh yeah, you want a piece of cake?" And he says that, or he goes, "Yeah, you want some birthday cake?" And he was sort of charging at me in the sense of like trying to take representation of my father, that I was after his money. Ken showed up, I think twice in my entire life at my house, and it was when I was 5, 6 years old, after the rape. That was it. That was all. And I think it's important because Sarah and Ken used to give the 2 times that he showed up. He was there, got dropped off for maybe an hour or 2, and then left. That was it. Other times, he showed up with his parents. He showed up one time by himself, stayed there for I don't even think he ever showed up by himself. I think he was just there for 30 minutes and just talked, and that was it. There was nothing, and he dropped off it's a little game with little fish on there, and you put a little fishing hook and you try to, and it does this, and you try to catch the fish, and you pull out the fish, a little kid game. And there were several little kid games that he brought and started to drop off. There was 2 or 3 games he dropped off. But I think it's important for me to talk about because this all relates to my mother. Whoever is in control of it, whoever says the story now, at least you make whatever it is that you want from it for my mother. I'm not in control over her. The gay community, the transgenders and the homosexuals, and the blacks and the whites are in control over my mother. And there's no one I know that's not protecting my mother. I know my mother so well and how she was. I could never express this enough, but to my understanding in this conversation, Coach Burns, or Michael Burns, is saying that in my history class, and it's very likely. Why would he be saying that woman with black hair is going to pay for it? I don't know if that was my dad's financial lawyers or what it was, or my mother's dead daughter's buried, because I still don't know who did. My mother didn't have the money, and my dad hadn't died yet. To have your dead daughter die right away and have your husband like that commit suicide, at the same time while having 3 other kids and having another child in another city that's been abducted, I know what I'm telling you. But if the president says, like they've been getting orders shitting in my mother's mouth, and that's exactly what this is Auschwitz. He's a Nazi. He's going to be a Nazi, most evil, satanic, evil shit, because my mother couldn't have been more innocent and vulnerable to the predators of his gay community and the Cooper family. And he continues to do it. I am her son. I was there. I was there when the rapes happened. I had to participate in these rapes. I saved my mother and brother, nearly costing my life when my mom was held hostage in a house, watching her scream. And this is all this has been about, been about them and the community representing them, and how they can mastermind my mother and everything that they did. Now, obviously this is a big entanglement. Julian's twin and different, I don't know what, maybe it was transgenders that raised him, maybe it was gays that did, I don't know, probably. But it's important for me to say this, because how is this going into my school about the dead little girl? So hopefully this resonates to some storytelling.